The storm that swept across the Wyoming plains in October of 1873 brought with it a fury that made even hardened ranchers whisper prayers. And when Penelope Nash stumbled through the driving rain toward the stone shelter at the edge of the property, she thought she might die before morning. Her clothes were soaked through, her boots ruined from 3 days of walking, and the fever that had started that afternoon made her bones ache with every step. The shelter appeared like a miracle through the sheets of rain, and she pushed open the wooden gate without thinking, desperate for anything with a roof. The smell hit her first, warm and animal, and as lightning flashed she saw them, dozens of goats huddled together in the stone building, their eyes reflecting the brief light. Penelope collapsed just inside the entrance, pulling the gate closed behind her against the howling wind. The goats bleated nervously at the intrusion, but the warmth of their bodies filled the space, and she crawled deeper into the shelter until she found a corner filled with dry hay. She burrowed into it, shivering violently, and let darkness take her. She woke to hands lifting her, strong and sure, and a voice speaking low words she could not quite understand through the fog in her mind. The fever had worsened overnight, and everything swam in her vision. She saw a face above her, weathered and concerned, dark hair falling across a tanned forehead, but the details blurred. "Easy now," the voice said, clearer this time. "You are burning up. How long have you been out here?" Penelope tried to answer, but her throat was too dry, and she managed only a croak before her eyes rolled back. The next time consciousness found her, she was in a bed, real blankets tucked around her, and the ceiling above was wooden beams instead of stone. Her fever had broken sometime in the night, leaving her weak and soaked with sweat, but her mind was clear. She turned her head slowly, taking in the room. It was simple but well kept, with a dresser against one wall, a washstand with a basin and pitcher, and curtains at the window through which morning light streamed. The door was partially open, and she could hear sounds from beyond it, someone moving around, the clatter of dishes. She pushed herself up on shaky arms, realizing someone had changed her clothes. She now wore a clean nightshirt, far too large for her frame, and her own dress hung over the back of a chair near the door, washed and drying. The kindness of that gesture brought tears to her eyes, the first real emotion she had allowed herself to feel since leaving Denver 3 weeks ago. A shadow crossed the doorway, and then the man from her fever dreams appeared, carrying a tray. He stopped when he saw her sitting up, and a smile crossed his face, transforming the serious lines into something warm. "You are awake. Good. I was starting to worry you would sleep another full day." He came into the room, setting the tray on the dresser. "I am Peter Novak. You were in my goat shelter during the storm. Nearly gave me a heart attack when I went to check on the animals and found a woman half frozen in the hay." "I am sorry," Penelope said, her voice rough. "I did not know where else to go. The storm came so fast. Do not apologize. You would have died out there." He poured water from the pitcher into a cup and brought it to her. "Drink this slowly. You have been fevered for 2 days." She took the cup with trembling hands, and he steadied it for her, guiding it to her lips. The water was cool and clean, the best thing she had ever tasted. She drank it all, and he refilled it without her asking. 2 days. She looked at him more carefully now that her vision was clear. He was perhaps 27 or 28, with strong features and eyes that held genuine concern. His clothes were simple ranch wear, a cotton shirt and worn trousers, but they were clean and well mended. 2 days. You have been in and out, mostly out. I got some willow bark tea into you when I could and kept you warm. The fever broke last night." He pulled the chair with her dress over and sat down, keeping a respectful distance. "What is your name? Where were you headed in such a storm?" The questions were gentle, but she heard the concern beneath them. She knew how this looked, a woman alone, half dead in a stranger's goat shelter. "My name is Madeline Lawson. I was traveling to Fort Laramie. I had heard there might be work there. Fort Laramie is 15 miles west of here. You were headed in the right direction at least." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "What kind of work were you looking for?" Madeline hesitated. The truth was complicated and shameful, but something in his steady gaze made her want to be honest. "Any kind. Cooking, cleaning, sewing. I can read and write. I was a school teacher in Denver until 6 months ago." "What happened 6 months ago?" She looked down at her hands. "My father died. He had debts I did not know about. They took the house, everything. I tried to keep teaching, but the school board said it was not proper for a woman without family to hold the position. They gave it to a man from St. Louis." The bitterness in her voice surprised her. She had tried so hard not to feel sorry for herself, but the injustice still stung. Peter was quiet for a moment, and when she looked up, his expression had hardened. "That is a poor way to treat someone. You lost your father and they kicked you when you were down." "The world is not always fair to women alone," Madeline said quietly. "No, it is not." He stood up and went to the tray, bringing it to her. There was a bowl of broth and some bread. "But you are not alone right now. You are here and you need to eat to get your strength back. Then we can talk about what comes next." The broth was rich and warm, and Madeline ate slowly, feeling strength seep back into her limbs with each swallow. Peter left her to eat in peace, and she heard him moving around the house, the sounds of normal life continuing around her. When she finished, exhaustion pulled at her again, and she settled back against the pillows. She slept through the afternoon and woke as the sun was setting, painting the room in shades of gold and pink. This time she felt strong enough to stand, and she got up slowly, testing her legs. They held, though they shook a little. She went to the window and looked out at the land beyond. The ranch spread out before her, modest but well-maintained. She could see the goat shelter where she had taken refuge, a sturdy stone building with a solid roof. Beyond it were pastures where goats grazed in the evening light, dozens of them, their coats shining white and brown and black. There was a barn, a chicken coop, and what looked like a vegetable garden, though most of the plants had been harvested for the season. In the distance, the Wyoming plains rolled away toward mountains that rose blue against the sky. It was beautiful in a stark way, lonely but peaceful. She understood why someone would choose to build a life here. "The view is better when you are not half dead," Peter said from the doorway, and she turned to find him watching her with an amused expression. "You should not be out of bed yet." "I needed to see where I was," Madeline said. "I do not even know what to call this place." "Most just call it the Novak Ranch, though that sounds more impressive than it is. I have 200 acres, most of it grazing land for the goats. I sell cheese and milk in Fort Laramie and to some of the ranches around here. It is a living, not a fortune, but it is mine." There was pride in his voice, the kind that came from building something with your own hands. "It is more than many have," Madeline said. "How long have you been here?" 5 years. I came west from Ohio after my parents died. Worked as a ranch hand for a while, saved every penny I could, and bought this land from a man who was going back east. The house was barely standing, the fences were falling down, and there was not a goat in sight, but I saw the potential. He came into the room and stood beside her at the window, looking out at his land. "I started with 10 goats. Now I have over 100. Next year I am hoping to expand into sheep as well." "You built all this yourself?" Madeline looked at him with new respect, with help here and there. "Neighbors will come together when something big needs doing. But mostly, yes, it has been hard work but good work." He turned to face her. You said you were looking for any kind of work. I have a proposal for you if you want to hear it. Madeline's heart skipped. What kind of proposal? The kind where we both benefit. I need help here. The house is falling into disorder because I spend all my time with the animals and the land. I need someone who can cook proper meals, keep things clean, maybe help with the cheese making and the chickens. You need a place to stay and a way to earn money. I can offer you room and board and wages besides. Not a fortune, but fair. It was more than she had hoped for, but years of being alone had taught her caution. You are offering to let a stranger live in your house. You are not a stranger anymore. I nursed you through a fever for 2 days. I know you talk in your sleep about books and teaching children their letters. I know you are afraid but trying not to show it. I know you are alone in the world and looking for a place to land. His voice was gentle. I am not offering anything improper. You would have your own room, this one. I sleep in the room across the hall. The work would be hard but honest. If after a month you want to leave and try Fort Laramie, I will drive you there myself and pay you for your time. But I think you might find this is a better place to be than you expected. Madeline studied his face, looking for deception or hidden motives, but found only sincerity. He was offering her exactly what she needed, a chance to catch her breath and build a little security. Pride warred with practicality, and practicality won. I accept, she said. And thank you. You have been kinder to me than you had any reason to be. Kindness should not need a reason, Peter said simply. Now get back in bed. You can start work when you are fully recovered. For now, you need to rest. Madeline did as he said, and as she settled back into the warm blankets, she felt something she had not felt in months. Hope. The next 2 days passed in a blur of sleep and small improvements. Peter brought her meals and checked on her fever, which stayed gone. He was respectful and kind, never lingering longer than necessary, always knocking before entering. On the 3rd day, Madeline woke feeling almost herself again, and she insisted on getting up despite Peter's protests. Her dress had dried completely and she changed into it, grateful to be in her own clothes again even if they were worn and patched. When she emerged from the bedroom, Peter was at the stove, frying eggs in a pan. He looked up and smiled. You have color in your cheeks again. That is good to see. I feel almost human, Madeline admitted. She looked around the main room of the house, seeing it clearly for the first time. It was a large open space, with the kitchen area at one end and a sitting area with a fireplace at the other. A table and chairs sat in the middle, and there were shelves along the walls holding books and supplies. Everything was functional but chaotic, with dishes stacked haphazardly, papers scattered on the table, and dust coating most surfaces. Peter saw her looking and had the grace to look sheepish. I told you the house needed work. I am better with animals than housekeeping. I can see that. Madeline rolled up her sleeves. Where do you keep the cleaning supplies? You are not working yet. You just got out of bed. I am well enough to wash some dishes. Besides, I will go mad if I have to sit still another minute. She found the wash basin and the soap without his help and started filling it with water from the pump by the sink. You have done enough for me. Let me do something useful. They worked together that morning, Peter finishing the breakfast while Madeline tackled the dishes. They ate together at the table, and she learned more about him between bites of eggs and toast. He had been 22 when he came west, alone, and carrying everything he owned in a single bag. He had worked on a cattle ranch for 3 years, learning the ways of the land, before deciding goats were a better bet for a man on his own. Cattle needed more hands, more space, more capital. Goats were hardy and easier to manage, and there was always a market for good cheese. Most people think goat cheese is strange, he said, but once they taste good quality, they come back. I sell out every time I go to town. I have never tried it, Madeline admitted. Then you are in for a treat. I have some aging in the cellar. I will bring some up for lunch. They fell into an easy rhythm over the following days. Madeline took over the house with a determination that surprised them both. She cleaned every surface until it shone, organized the shelves, mended the curtains that had been torn and hanging crooked. She took over the cooking, and Peter praised every meal with genuine appreciation. In return, he taught her about the goats, showing her how to milk them, how to check for signs of illness, how to help with the cheese making. The work was hard, harder than teaching had ever been, but it was satisfying in a different way. At the end of each day, she could see what she had accomplished: the clean house, the fed chickens, the wheels of cheese set to age. There was something deeply fulfilling about it. Peter was a good teacher, patient and thorough, never making her feel foolish for not knowing something. He showed her how to card wool from the few sheep he kept, how to churn butter, how to preserve vegetables for winter. In return, she found herself teaching him things without meaning to, correcting his grammar when he spoke, discussing the books on his shelves that he admitted he had never read. "I bought them because I thought I should," he confessed one evening as they sat by the fire after dinner. "I can read, but I am slow at it, never had much schooling." "Reading is just practice," Madeline said. She pulled down a volume of poetry and opened it. "Here, I will read to you." She read aloud for an hour that night, and it became a tradition. After dinner, they would sit by the fire and she would read while he worked on some small task, mending leather or sharpening tools. He listened with an intensity that surprised her, sometimes asking her to reread a passage, wanting to understand it better. "You make the words come alive," he said one night. "When I read them myself, they are just marks on paper, but when you read them, they have meaning." "That is what good teaching does," Madeline said. "It makes things accessible. You must miss it. Teaching, I mean." She was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. "I do. I loved seeing children learn, watching their faces light up when something finally made sense. But this is not a bad life either. Different, but not bad. I am glad you think so." Peter's voice was soft, and when she looked at him, there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Then he looked away, back to the harness he was mending, and the moment passed. But Madeline felt it again the next day and the next. Small moments when their hands touched reaching for the same dish, when he smiled at something she said, when she caught him watching her from across the room. A warmth was growing between them, something beyond gratitude or friendship, and it both thrilled and terrified her. She had been at the ranch for 3 weeks when Peter came in from the goat shelter looking troubled. It was late afternoon, and Madeline was kneading bread dough at the table. She looked up at his expression and immediately set the dough aside, wiping her hands on her apron. "What is wrong?" "One of the nannies is having trouble birthing. I have been trying to help her for an hour, but the kid is stuck. I do not want to lose either of them." He ran a hand through his hair, leaving it standing on end. "I am going back out. I just wanted to let you know I might be a while. Can I help?" Madeline was already untying her apron. "It is not pleasant work. I have seen animals born before. My grandfather had a farm when I was young. Let me help." They went to the shelter together, and Madeline knelt in the hay beside the struggling goat without hesitation. Peter had been right. It was not pleasant, but she focused on the task at hand, following his instructions, helping to guide the kid into the world. It took another hour of careful work, but finally the baby goat slid free, wet and bleeding, and the mother nanny began cleaning it immediately. "You did it," Madeline said, watching the kid try to stand on wobbly legs. "They are both going to be fine." Peter was washing his hands in a bucket of water, but he was looking at her with something like wonder. "You did not even flinch. Most fine ladies would have run screaming." "I am not a fine lady," Madeline said. I am just a woman trying to survive, and besides, there is nothing shameful about birth. It is a miracle every time." Peter dried his hands slowly, still watching her. "You are remarkable, Madeline Lawson. Do you know that?" Her heart stuttered in her chest. "I am just doing what needs to be done." "No." He stepped closer, and she could smell the clean scent of the soap on his skin. "You are doing more than that. You turned a house into a home. You work as hard as any ranch hand I ever knew. You read poetry to an uneducated goat farmer at night and make him feel like he has worth beyond the labor of his hands. You are remarkable, and I think I am falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest, and Madeline felt tears spring to her eyes. "Peter, I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything right now. I just needed you to know. I was not looking for this. I thought I would live out here alone, just me and my goats and my land. But then you stumbled into my shelter during a storm and everything changed." He reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "I am not asking you to feel the same way. I know this is complicated. You work for me, you live in my house. But I could not keep pretending I felt nothing when every time you smile at me, my whole world gets brighter." Madeline closed her eyes, letting the tears fall freely now. "I was not looking for this either. After my father died, after I lost everything, I thought I would never trust anyone again. But you have been so kind, so good. You saved my life, Peter. You gave me a home when I had nothing. And somewhere in these past weeks, I stopped seeing you as my employer and started seeing you as something more." "What do you see?" His voice was barely a whisper. She opened her eyes and looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the strength in his arms from years of hard work, the kindness in his eyes, the honesty in his face. She saw a man who had built something from nothing and was willing to share it with her. She saw someone who read poetry even though it was hard for him because she loved it. She saw the man she had been falling in love with without realizing it. "I see you," she said simply. "I see a good man with a good heart. I see someone I could love if I let myself. I think I already do." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise, and then he was pulling her close, kissing her with a gentleness that took her breath away. She melted into him, wrapping her arms around his neck, kissing him back with all the emotion she had been holding inside. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "I want to court you properly, take you to dances in town, introduce you to the neighbors as the woman I intend to marry if you will have me. You want to marry me." Madeline pulled back to look at him. "Not tomorrow, not even next month. But yes, eventually, if you feel the same. I want you to be my wife, not my housekeeper. I want you to be mistress of this ranch, equal partner in everything. I want to build a life with you, Madeline, if you will let me." The enormity of what he was offering hit her, not just his love, but his home, his land, his future. Everything he had worked for, he was willing to share with her. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I want that too." They held each other in the goat shelter while the mother nanny nursed her newborn kid, and Madeline thought that she had never been happier. She had stumbled into this place half dead, with nothing to her name, and now she had everything that mattered. Love, home, purpose, hope. Over the next weeks, Peter was true to his word. He courted her properly, taking her into Fort Laramie on Saturday afternoons, walking with her down the main street with her hand on his arm, introducing her to everyone as his intended. The gossip was immediate and intense. A woman had appeared from nowhere, living on his ranch, and now they were courting. But Peter ignored the wagging tongues, and the quality of Madeline's character soon won over even the most critical. She met his neighbors at a barn raising at the Johnson Ranch, where she helped the women prepare food while Peter worked with the men. Mrs. Johnson, A sturdy woman with kind eyes pulled her aside. "I do not care what some people are saying. I can see how he looks at you and how you look at him. That is real. And Lord knows Peter Novak deserves some happiness. He has worked himself to the bone on that ranch for 5 years. It is good he has someone to share it with now." "Thank you," Madeline said, touched by the woman's kindness. "I know how it looks. Looks do not matter much out here. Results do. I have seen the cheese Peter has been bringing to town. It is better than ever. That tells me things are good at his ranch, and that is all I need to know." The other women gradually warmed to her as well, drawn by her friendly nature and genuine interest in their lives. She shared recipes and sewing techniques, listened to their stories, and slowly became part of the community. In November, Peter took her to a harvest dance in Fort Laramie. She wore the one good dress she owned, a blue calico she had patched and mended so many times the original fabric was hard to see, but Peter looked at her like she was wearing silk and diamonds. They danced under lanterns strung across the town hall, and he held her close enough to whisper in her ear, "You are the most beautiful woman here. You are biased," she laughed. "I am honest." He spun her around and her skirt flared out, "And I am the luckiest man in Wyoming." They walked home under a sky full of stars, the temperature dropping as night deepened. Peter draped his coat over her shoulders, and they talked about everything and nothing. When they reached the ranch, he kissed her goodnight at the door to her room, always the gentleman, though the heat in his eyes promised more for the future. Winter came early and hard that year, with snow starting in late November and not letting up. They were snowed in for days at a time, but Madeline found she did not mind. The house was warm and cozy, the pantry was well stocked, and she had Peter for company. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading, talking, planning for the future. "I want to expand the house in the spring," Peter said one night. "Add a proper parlor, maybe another bedroom or two." "Planning for children already," Madeline teased, but her heart swelled at the thought. "Planning for the future, whatever that brings." He pulled her closer, and she rested her head on his shoulder. "I want to start a small school," she said. "Not a formal one, just for the ranch children around here. So many of them have no access to education. I could teach them reading and arithmetic a few days a week." "That is a wonderful idea. We could use part of the barn in summer, set up a small building in winter. I will help you build it." They dreamed together, making plans, building castles in the air that they would make real through hard work and determination. Madeline had never felt so content, so full of purpose and love. On Christmas Eve, Peter asked her to marry him formally. They were sitting by the fire, and he got down on one knee with a ring he had bought in Fort Laramie weeks ago, waiting for the right moment. "Madeline Lawson, you came into my life during a storm, and you brought sunshine with you. You have made my house a home, my days brighter, and my future something to look forward to instead of just endure. Will you marry me and be my partner in all things for the rest of our lives?" The ring was simple, a thin gold band with a small stone, but to Madeline it was more precious than the finest jewel. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her, and they held each other while the fire crackled and snow fell softly outside. They were married in February, during a break in the weather. The ceremony was held at the small church in Fort Laramie, with half the town attending. Mrs. Johnson stood as Madeline's witness, and Tom Rivers, Peter's closest neighbor, stood as his. The preacher spoke about love and commitment, and when Peter kissed her as his wife, the congregation cheered. The celebration afterward was held at the Johnson Ranch, with food and music and dancing. Madeline wore a new dress, cream-colored with lace at the collar, that the women of Fort Laramie had helped her sew. Peter wore his best suit, and they looked at each other like they held the sun and moon. "You are my wife," Peter said wonderingly as they danced, the first dance as husband and wife. "I am your wife," Madeline agreed, and the rightness of it settled into her bones. This was where she belonged with this man in this place. All the pain and loss she had endured to get here suddenly made sense. It had all led her to him. They rode back to the ranch in Peter's wagon, bundled under blankets against the cold, and he carried her over the threshold of their home. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, and afterward, lying in his arms in the bed that was now theirs, Madeline felt complete in a way she never had before. Spring came with new life everywhere. The goats had kids, the chickens hatched chicks, and Madeline discovered she was pregnant. She told Peter on a morning in late April when the world was green and growing, and he lifted her up and spun her around with joy. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby." "You are going to be a father," Madeline said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Are you ready for that?" "I was not ready for you either, but look how well that turned out." He kissed her soundly. "We will figure it out together like we do everything else." They worked together through that spring and summer, preparing for the baby's arrival. Peter built a cradle from smooth pine, carving designs into the headboard, flowers and vines that would watch over their child. Madeline sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her hands busy with needle and thread in the evenings. The small school she had dreamed of became a reality, with 6 children from surrounding ranches coming 3 mornings a week to learn their letters and numbers. She taught them sitting in the shade of the barn in the warm months, and Peter built a small schoolhouse that would be ready by fall. The community rallied around them, bringing gifts for the baby, offering advice and help. Madeline's pregnancy was healthy and uncomplicated, and she worked alongside Peter almost until the end, tending the goats and the garden, cooking and cleaning, teaching the children. She had never felt stronger or more capable. The baby came on a cold October night, almost exactly 1 year after Madeline had stumbled into the goat shelter during that storm. Mrs. Johnson attended her, along with 2 other ranch women experienced in birthing. Peter paced outside the bedroom door, driven out by the women who insisted he would just be in the way, though they let him in at the end to hold Madeline's hand through the final pushes. Their son was born just after midnight, howling his arrival with healthy lungs. Peter cut the cord with shaking hands, and then the baby was placed in Madeline's arms, pink and perfect in theirs. "He is beautiful," Peter whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "He is perfect." "He needs a name," Madeline said, exhausted but glowing. They had discussed names for months without settling on one. "What about Matthew?" Peter suggested. "Matthew Novak." "Matthew," Madeline said, testing the name. "Yes, I like that. Matthew Novak. Welcome to the world, little one." The baby's first months were a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming love. Peter was a devoted father, walking the floor with Matthew when he cried, changing diapers without complaint, singing off key lullabies that somehow soothed the baby better than anything else. Madeline watched them together and fell even more deeply in love with her husband, seeing him in this new role. The ranch prospered. With Madeline as true partner, helping with the business side as well as the physical work, they expanded their operation. They added sheep to the goats, bought more land from a neighbor who was moving back east, and started selling their cheese as far away as Cheyenne. The school grew too, with more children attending, and Madeline hired a young woman from Fort Laramie to help teach on the days when she was too busy with Matthew or the ranch. Life settled into a rhythm, the seasons turning, the years passing. Matthew grew into a bright, curious boy who loved the animals and the land. When he was 3, Madeline gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, and 2 years after that, Another son they called James. The house expanded with each child, Peter building on rooms as they needed them, the ranch house growing from a simple dwelling into a rambling home filled with noise and love and life. Madeline's school became an official institution, recognized by the territorial government. They built a larger schoolhouse, and children came from as far as 15 miles away to attend. Madeline taught reading and writing, arithmetic and history, and she loved every moment of it. She had found a way to combine her passion for teaching with her life on the ranch, and the fulfillment it brought her was immeasurable. Peter's reputation as a rancher and cheesemaker grew. People came from all over Wyoming to buy his goats and learn his techniques. He was always generous with his knowledge, helping other ranchers get started, believing that prosperity shared was prosperity multiplied. He served on the town council in Fort Laramie, working to bring more resources to the rural areas, to build roads and bridges and improve life for everyone. Through it all, Peter and Madeline remained deeply in love. They still sat by the fire in the evenings when the children were asleep, talking about their days, making plans for the future. They still danced in the kitchen when the mood struck them, Peter spinning her around while she laughed. They still looked at each other across the dinner table surrounded by their children and felt grateful for the storm that had brought them together. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Peter took Madeline back to the goat shelter where he had found her. It had been expanded and improved over the years, but it was still the same basic structure. They stood in the doorway, looking at the place where their story had begun. "I think about that night often," Peter said. "How easily I could have missed you. If the storm had been worse, if I had waited until morning to check on the goats, if you had not had the strength to make it to this shelter." "But none of those things happened," Madeline said, taking his hand. "I made it here, you found me, and everything that came after was meant to be." "Do you ever regret it? Giving up the city, the chance to teach in a real school, all of that?" Madeline looked at him, at the face she loved more than any other, at the man who had given her not just shelter but a home, not just work but purpose, not just companionship but deep and abiding love. "Not for a single moment. This life, this ranch, our children, you, this is everything I ever wanted, even when I did not know I wanted it." "You are the mistress of everything here," Peter said. "Equal partner in all we have built. You know that, do not you?" "I do," Madeline said. "But more than that, I am loved. And I love you. That is worth more than anything else." They kissed in the doorway of the goat shelter, the same shelter where she had sought refuge 10 years ago, half dead and alone. Now she was full of life, surrounded by family and community, her days filled with purpose and joy. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges, triumphs and sorrows. They lost a hard winter that killed half their herd, and they rebuilt. Madeline's school burned down in a lightning strike, and the community came together to build it back better than before. Peter's mother came west to live with them in her final years, and Madeline cared for her with the same devotion she showed to everything she loved. The children grew and thrived, Matthew deciding to study animal husbandry at the new agricultural college in Laramie, Sarah showing a gift for teaching that made her mother's heart swell with pride, James proving to be a natural businessman who took over the cheese-selling operation and tripled their profits. Through everything, the ranch remained the center of their world, the place they had built together from almost nothing. It was not just land and buildings and animals. It was a testament to what two people could create when they worked together with love and determination. It was proof that the hardest times could lead to the greatest blessings. It was home. Madeline and Peter grew old together, their hair turning gray, their hands becoming weathered from decades of work, but their love never fading. They sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over their land, holding hands like they had when they were young. "Do you remember when I told you I was falling in love with you?" Peter asked one evening. They were in their 60s now, surrounded by grandchildren who ran around the yard playing. "In the goat shelter after we helped that nanny give birth. Of course I remember. It was the day my life truly began." "Mine too." Peter squeezed her hand. "You made me understand what it meant to be truly happy. Not just content, but deeply, completely happy." "You gave me a home when I had nothing," Madeline said. "You gave me love when I had given up on ever finding it. You gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams." "We gave each other everything," Peter said. "That is what real partnership means." One of their granddaughters came running up to the porch, breathless and excited. "Grandma, Grandpa, come see. There are new baby goats in the shelter." Madeline and Peter looked at each other and laughed. "Some things never change," Madeline said. They walked to the shelter hand in hand, surrounded by grandchildren, and watched new life enter the world just as they had done so many times before. The cycle continued, seasons turning, life renewing itself, and at the center of it all was the love they had built together. Years later, when they were both old and tired, Peter and Madeline sat on their porch one last time as the sun set over the Wyoming plains. Their children and grandchildren filled the house behind them, a gathering for Madeline's 80th birthday. The ranch was still thriving, now run by Matthew and his family, but incorporating everything Peter and Madeline had built over their lifetimes. "We did well," Peter said quietly. He was 82 now, his movements slow, but his mind was still sharp and his love for his wife undiminished. "We did very well," Madeline agreed. She leaned her head on his shoulder, still fitting perfectly against him after all these years. "I could not have asked for a better life." "Thank you for stumbling into my goat shelter during that storm," Peter said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Thank you for finding me and seeing not a burden but a partner. Thank you for loving me, for building this life with me, for making me mistress of everything that matters." "Always," Peter said. "You have always been the mistress of my heart." They sat together as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple, holding hands, surrounded by the family and the life they had created together. From desperate beginnings in a storm had grown something beautiful and lasting, a love story that would be told to their great-grandchildren and beyond. The ranch would continue, passing from generation to generation. The school would keep teaching children their letters and numbers, carrying on Madeline's legacy. The goats would keep having kids, the seasons would keep turning, and the spirit of partnership and love that Peter and Madeline had built would endure. As darkness fell and the stars came out over Wyoming, Madeline thought about that terrified, fevered woman who had collapsed in a goat shelter so many years ago. She had been lost then, broken by grief and hardship, with nothing to her name and no hope for the future. But she had been found by a good man with a good heart, and together they had built a kingdom out of nothing. She was the mistress of everything now, not because of wealth or status, but because she was loved deeply and loved deeply in return. She had a home, a family, a purpose, and a partner who had never wavered in his devotion. She had everything that truly mattered, and it had all started in a goat shelter during a storm when a cowboy found her and saw not what she was, but what she could become. The children called them in for birthday cake, and Peter helped Madeline to her feet. They walked into their home together, surrounded by the people they loved, and Madeline knew that this was the happy ending she had stopped believing in all those years ago. It was not perfect because life never was, but it was real and true and beautiful. It was everything. Matthew stood and raised a glass, calling for quiet. "To my mother," he said, his voice full of emotion, "who taught us that strength comes in many forms, that love is the foundation of everything good, and that a home is not a place but the people in it. Happy birthday, Mama. Everyone cheered and drank, and Madeline wiped tears from her eyes. Peter kissed her cheek and whispered, "Mistress of everything, just as I promised." "Partner in everything," she corrected gently. "That is better than being mistress of anything." "Partner then," Peter agreed, "now and always." The party continued late into the night, filled with laughter and stories and the warmth of family. When everyone finally left or went to bed, Peter and Madeline sat alone in their bedroom, the room where so much of their life had unfolded. Where she had first woken from her fever, where they had spent their wedding night, where their children had been conceived, where they had comforted each other through sorrows and celebrated triumphs. "I am tired," Madeline admitted, letting Peter help her into her nightgown. "It was a big day," Peter said. He climbed into bed beside her, and she curled against him like she had done for nearly 50 years. "All our days have been big," Madeline said. "Even the ordinary ones, because I got to spend them with you." "The best decision I ever made was asking you to stay," Peter said. "The best luck I ever had was you saying yes." "It was not luck," Madeline said. "It was fate. We were meant to find each other, meant to build this life together. I believe that." "So do I," Peter said. He kissed the top of her head. "Sleep now, my love. Tomorrow will be another good day." Madeline closed her eyes, safe and warm in her husband's arms in the home they had built together, surrounded by the family they had created. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the losses and the fears, the moment of desperation that had led her to seek shelter with the goats, and the incredible grace of being found by exactly the right person at exactly the right time. She had been sheltering with his goats when the cowboy found her, half dead and hopeless. He had made her mistress of everything, giving her not just his home and his name, but his heart and his partnership, building a life with her that exceeded anything she could have imagined. And in return, she had given him the same: her heart, her strength, her mind, her love. They had created something together that was greater than either of them alone, a legacy that would outlive them both. As she drifted off to sleep, Madeline smiled. It had been a good life, a very good life indeed, full of love and purpose and meaning. She had been lost and she had been found. She had been broken and she had been made whole. She had been alone and she had found her home. And it had all started with a storm, a shelter, and a cowboy who looked at a desperate woman and saw not a burden but a future. The morning after her 80th birthday, Madeline woke slowly, peacefully. Peter was already up, and she could smell coffee brewing. She dressed and went to the kitchen, finding him at the stove making breakfast like he had done thousands of times before. "Good morning, birthday girl," he said with a smile. "How does it feel to be 80? "The same as 79, only with more cake memories," Madeline said, kissing his cheek. She poured herself coffee and sat at the table, looking around the kitchen that had been the heart of their home for so long. "Last night was wonderful. Thank you for arranging it." "The children did most of the work. I just paid for the cake." Peter brought plates to the table, eggs and bacon and toast. "What do you want to do today?" "The same thing we do every day," Madeline said. "Be together." They ate breakfast in comfortable silence, the kind that only came from decades of knowing each other completely. After breakfast, they walked around the ranch together, Peter's steps slower now but still sure. They visited the goat shelter, the expanded barn, the schoolhouse, the garden. Every corner of the ranch held memories. "Sometimes I still cannot believe all of this is real," Madeline said as they stood looking over the pastures where hundreds of goats and sheep grazed. "That this is my life." "Our life," Peter corrected. "You built this as much as I did. More, maybe." "We built it together," Madeline said firmly. "That is the point. Neither of us could have done this alone." They walked back to the house hand in hand, and Madeline thought about all the hands that had helped build their life. The neighbors who had welcomed her, the children she had taught, the community that had supported them through hard times, and most of all, the man beside her who had seen her worth when she had forgotten it herself. The seasons continued to turn after that birthday, bringing both joy and inevitable sorrow. Peter's health began to fail the following winter, and though Madeline nursed him with the same devotion he had shown her all those years ago when she had been fevered and lost, they both knew his time was coming to an end. "I am not afraid," Peter told her one evening as they sat by the fire. "I've lived a full life, a happy life. I have you, our children, this ranch. I have no regrets." "I am afraid," Madeline admitted, tears streaming down her face. "I do not know how to be in this world without you." "You will be fine," Peter said gently, wiping her tears away. "You are the strongest person I have ever known. You survived losing your father, losing everything, walking through a storm half dead. You will survive this too." "I do not want to. I know. But you will, because our children need you, our grandchildren need you, the school needs you." "You still have work to do, my love. Promise me you will keep going." "I promise," Madeline whispered. Peter passed peacefully in his sleep a week later, surrounded by his family, his hand in Madeline's. She held him as he took his last breath, and though her heart shattered, she knew he had been right. He had lived a full, happy life, and he had been loved completely until the very end. The ranch mourned their loss, and so did the broader community. Peter Novak had been a pillar of the area, a man who had helped countless others, who had built something lasting and good. His funeral was attended by hundreds, and Madeline stood strong through it all, supported by her children and the community that had become her family. In the days after, as Madeline adjusted to life without her partner, she found strength in the things they had built together. The ranch continued under Matthew's capable management. The school still taught children their letters. The goats still had kids every spring. Peter's legacy lived on in everything around her, and in that, she found comfort. She lived another 5 years without him, years filled with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, with teaching and community service, with quiet evenings remembering and celebrating the life they had shared. She never remarried, never even considered it. Peter had been her great love, her once in a lifetime, and that was enough. On a spring morning in her 86th year, Madeline woke feeling peaceful and ready. She dressed carefully in her best dress, the one she had worn to her 50th wedding anniversary. She walked through the house, touching the furniture she and Peter had chosen together, the pictures on the walls that told the story of their life. She went to the goat shelter one last time, the place where it had all begun, and stood in the doorway remembering a terrified young woman and a kind young man, and the moment their lives had intersected. "Thank you," she whispered to the memory, to Peter, to fate itself. "Thank you for everything." She walked back to the house and lay down on their bed, the bed where they had slept together for nearly 50 years. She closed her eyes and thought of him, waiting for her, and she smiled. When her daughter Sarah found her that afternoon, Madeline was gone, a peaceful expression on her face, her hands folded over her heart. Sarah wept, but she also smiled, because she knew her mother had lived exactly the life she wanted, and she had died knowing she was loved and had loved well in return. They buried Madeline next to Peter on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a spreading cottonwood tree. The headstone read, "Madeline Lawson Novak, beloved wife, mother, teacher, friend, mistress of everything that mattered." The ranch continued for generations after, each new family adding their own chapter while honoring the legacy of Peter and Madeline. The story of how they met, how a desperate woman sought shelter with goats during a storm and was found by a cowboy who made her his partner in all things, became family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren. The school Madeline founded still stood, expanded now into a proper building with multiple teachers, but her original schoolhouse was preserved as a reminder of where it all began. Students still learned the same values she had taught, that education was power, that kindness mattered, that hard work and love could build something lasting. And in the goat shelter, now over a century old but still standing strong, a plaque hung on the wall with the words, "Here began a love story that built a legacy. May we all be so lucky to find shelter in the storm and love in the finding." Years turned to decades, decades to a century, and still the story lived on. Great-great-grandchildren who never knew Peter and Madeline personally still felt the impact of their lives, still benefited from the foundation they had laid. The ranch prospered, the school thrived, and the community they had helped build continued to grow and flourish. That was the true happily ever after, not just that Peter and Madeline loved each other, though they had deeply and truly. Not just that they built a successful ranch, though they had worked hard and smart to create prosperity. The real happy ending was in the legacy they left, the lives they touched, the difference they made. Two people who had both lost everything found each other in a storm and built a kingdom out of love and partnership. They proved that endings could become beginnings, that the worst moments could lead to the best outcomes, that shelter could be found in the most unexpected places. She had been sheltering with his goats when he found her, broken and lost and alone. He made her mistress of everything, not just his possessions but his heart, his dreams, his life. And together, they created something that outlasted them both, something beautiful and true and enduring. That was the story, the whole story of Madeline Lawson and Peter Novak. It started with a storm and ended with a legacy, and in between was a lifetime of love, partnership, joy, struggle, triumph, and grace. It was an ordinary story in some ways, just two people building a life together. But in the ways that mattered most, it was extraordinary, a testament to what two people could create when they chose love, when they worked together, when they saw each other truly and valued that above all else. And so the story ended where all good stories should, with love victorious, with lives well lived, with a legacy that would echo through generations. The goats still grazed on the Wyoming plains, the ranch still stood strong, and somewhere in the wind that swept across the land, the spirits of a cowboy and a teacher walked hand in hand, still partners, still in love, still together, always together. The end.